Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. If you want to support me, that is, on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 46 of Once Broken. Jacoby was seething. He sat in the hover watching the two sides of the building he expected them to exit from, and he was pissed. He couldn't believe Tech had kicked him off the job just because he'd expressed his opposition to what was going to happen after it was over. That wasn't how you ran a job. Okay, so he'd lost his cool, but the way Alex had lied to him, was it surprising? At least he hadn't been so angry as to sabotage the job. Stopping the lift on the deserted floor and hiding the body in the storage room had been simple enough, as was exiting through the main entrance. He still looked like a drone, and the guard hadn't cared who left, just who entered. Repositioning the hover had been trickier. This part of the city was almost entirely buildings, all of them different heights, but close enough to only leave narrow alleys between them. This was a family vacation hover, not a sleek Corvette. He'd ended up settling on a low rooftop. This model could hover up to 60 feet above before it became unstable, and the roof was 70, so it had taken some finessing, but he'd made it. Jacoby wished he could tap into the cameras or had some of his own he could use to cover the other two sides of the building, just in case, but since Tech had told them to leave, they'd need a new vehicle. There were these two sides had exits, letting them mix with the walking crowd and reaching and reach the vehicle storage structure 3 blocks over. Tech had demonstrated his skill in obtaining his own hover when he'd gotten this one. But he wasn't leaving them to fend for themselves. Once they were done here, they could go together to the shuttle for the station. It would give them time to talk, and for Jacoby to make Tech see reason. He didn't belong here. He didn't know anyone here. He belonged on Tyrion too. He looked up when a shadow passed over him. Cities didn't allow vehicles to fly low enough to cast shadows, since it meant they were also low enough to hit buildings. While he couldn't make out details, he could tell it was a shuttle, a small transport. Probably someone late for a delivery and cutting time by flying within the city airspace instead of going back to the travel lanes to cross it. It was their credits. He focused on the size of the building. When it registered, the shuttle had been slowing. He looked up again in time to see it come to a stop and settle on the roof of the building. Roof of a building. The building he was watching. With a curse, he started the hover. He had no idea who they were, but there was no way a shuttle landing on the same building Tech and Alex were doing the job at was coincidence or a good thing. He looked around at the other buildings. He wished they were laid out so the stairs he needed his hover to climb went directly to the roof, but he didn't have that kind of luck. He was going to have to lose time going back and forth. He called up the city topography and had it display the height of every building in this area. Years ago, on a botched job, he discovered that hover stop flying height wasn't the maximum that he could trick one into jumping. By conquering the anti-grav as high as it could go while falling, it condensed the air to a point it registered as solid and the hover sprang up again. The trick was making sure there was a building to land on afterward, because there was no way the capacitors recharged in time to do that before crashing again, unless the hover had been rigged specifically for that. After getting the concept to basically work in the field, once he and Reggie had walked away from what should have been a deadly crash, he found he could pull off the same trick without being in the air. Like if he happened to be on a rooftop. He set the target buildings. He was lucky vacation hover were designed to carry extra weight, so it had extra capacitors to compensate. Having barely any weight in it, and with the number of capacitors this hover had, he could split them and safely triple the height the hover could reach with each jump. He Could double that if he used them all, but then he'd have to wait for all the capacitors to recharge. He hoped this way would let the unused set recharge as he set himself up for the next jump. All right, baby. Tech is depending on us, so don't let me down. He set half the capacitors on the ready and flew forward to the edge of the building. He jumped, waited until the apogee, and discharged the capacitor. The hover slid sideways as it went higher and almost missed the target roof, but made it on, the landing scraping the underside. Sorry about that, he smiled. This was going to work. After this, I'm giving you a quiet family who'll do nothing but take you out for vacations, I promise. He glanced up at the building as he turned the hover and aimed at the next roof. He could just make out the back of the shuttle. He had to hurry. All right, once more, you can do this. The capacitors weren't recharging as fast as he wanted, but he didn't have a choice. He had to make it up there. And this concludes chapter 46 of Once Broken. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to read this story as well as the other books in the series, they are available at all major e-retailers. If you want a different way to support me, that is on my Patreon, where you can basically get access to just about everything I've written. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.